Hello fellow crafty souls, and welcome back to the channel. Today's card is another one for Year of the Stencil. This one is a masculine birthday card featuring the technique of Joseph's coat. So this technique, I will be using some coloured Altenew dyes, so, inks, so navy, desert night, emerald, some turquoise and some starlight, and placing some Versafine Onyx black over the top. And I will be doing some random colouring and then colouring the Versafine through the stencil. For the sentiment, I'm actually using the Happy Birthday sentiment out of the Intricut exclusive dies that came with the Gina Intri-cut machine. So I was lucky enough to use that one. I start off with my Altenew Stampwheel, which I love for doing my stenciling, and I'm just going to do some random turquoise and blue splotches of ink all over the cardstock, giving my brushes a quick clean first, really just to get the residual ink off the surface of the brushes. I don't wash my brushes. Washing my brushes takes too much time, and I'd rather be crafting than cleaning. We need to make a shirt out of that one. So I'll start off using a bit of the Emerald Fresh Dye Ink. I love these inks. I think they're beautiful. The ink pads are rich and they're firm to use, and look at that glorious color. So I'm using the turquoise. I had difficulty, I don't know, getting the color out of the ink pad, or I don't know, but it just wasn't laying down dark enough for my liking. So I gave it a red hot go, trying to get it onto the paper, and I'm now using the Starlight. This is a beautiful blue, this one. There's no rhyme or reason where I'm putting any of these ink colors. I'm just kind of throwing them down. The Desert Night, and again, the difference between the crisp ink and the fresh dye ink is they're slightly different formulations, and I've just found these ink pads really nice and juicy. So now I'm going to use my Versafine, which is a pigment ink. Give my stamp wheel a quick clean before I start using my Versafine. And it's nothing fancy that I'm using. This is just a standard car chamois. Cost me about $10 from one of the car shops on my way into town one day. I thought I'd just grab one, and this is a stencil from Kaisercraft, and so I'm just using a blending brush to apply the black ink straight over the top of that random splodge background. So I learned a couple of things making this card, and my first lesson learned is here when I was applying the Versafine ink, and that is, if I use this stencil, particular stencil again, I would actually use a bit of pixie spray to glue, to stick down the whole row of the stencil and not just have to hang on to it the way I did. So to try and minimize the movement, I actually went side to side rather than in a circular motion applying the ink. So taking off the stencil very, very carefully, and I am stoked with how that turned out. You can see there's some drag marks and some spots where the stencil actually moved while I was applying the ink. However, I'm not mad at it. It's going to have a sentiment. It's going to have some dots. I'm using a bit of alcohol foam to clean off my stencil, and I have a tendency to make more mess as I clean than not. So I've got my stencil clean, and I will then go through and use the Ultra Clean to clean my Altenew Stampwheel. And yet the stamp wheel is well loved with the inks. It does not affect how the stamp wheel performs, which is it hangs on to cardstock beautifully. I use it for a lot of my ink blending and stenciling now more than ever. So I'm just going to hit this panel with the heat tool. The Versafine is actually a pigment ink, so it will take a little bit longer to dry. And I don't know about you guys, but I stick my hands into my card panels and I will smear the ink everywhere. So I'm trying to minimize, this is risk minimization or harm minimization by actually hitting the panel with the heat tool first. So now I'm going to use my Happy Birthday die and the shadow, and using my Intricut machine and awkwardly showing you that I have it on the die cut setting. So folding these doors out is going to activate the suction cups, and it is going to stick to the glass mat like there is no tomorrow. So my second thing that I learned making this card is I normally stack my sentiments for some depth and a bit of body, and normally the sentiments will be joined together. These are individual letters, and I cut this out 3 times and had to then go through and painstakingly stick all 3 layers of the different letters. So if I'm sticking it to the shadow, I will only cut it out once from now on. So I'm just using a bit of vellum to cut out the shadow backing for this sentiment, and that's the majority of my die cutting done. I think I